some of the readings written by men is that, well, if you live next door to the king, you know what time he comes out for his walk. So you're obviously going to have this shower outside. You're going to bathe yourself outside your house so that he can have that opportunity of looking over.
Which is so in line with like modern contemporary dialogue from men about things like purity culture, where it's like, well, if you didn't want that behavior, then you shouldn't dress like that, or you shouldn't behave this way, which is placing all of the responsibility for things like assault onto the woman, which you can trace all the way back to narratives like this in scripture, which have been presented through a male lens. Welcome back to another episode of Filthy Hope. On this podcast, we love to spend time in the grey spaces where Jesus, life, and culture intersect. As always, I'm your host, Pastor Jonty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rev Ness.
Hello, brother.
How's it going?
I'm excited about today.
Tell me why.
Because look who's on the screen with us. For anybody that's watching us on YouTube today, they can see this beautiful woman on the screen. Please welcome our friend, Tao'alofa Anga'aelangi. Beautiful Reverend sister. We went through college together, Jonty. And yes,
there you go.
Yes, we went through UTC together and seminary school together with Reverend Mother. We were there at the same time, and we know all the same peeps. It's really cool, and we're buddies. And Lofa, is it okay if I call you Lofa?
Fine.
Lofa is a chaplain, university chaplain at Charles Sturt University at the Port Macquarie campus.
Gotcha.
And we have never interviewed a chaplain at a university before.
No.
So this is going to be such a cool conversation, Lofa. We can't wait to hear about what your job as a deacon, Reverend, is all about, because we were having the conversation just recently. We were asked in one of our podcasts about, in a question time, what is a deacon and how is a deacon different from a minister of the word? And that launched us into a whole big conversation. And so what a perfect timing to have another fellow deacon on the show today.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, super excited. Yeah.
So Lofa, can you tell us a little bit for our audience who you are? Tell us a bit about the Lofa story.
So my name's Rev Lofa. I am a first-generation Tongan Australian. My family and I migrated to Australia in 1992. And so at that time, I was around about 9 years old. So grew up in Western Sydney, around Granville and Parramatta area, Parramatta Hills, then.
Shout out to the Pensini boys.
Yes. And so I grew up around that area, grew up in the church. So the Free Wesleyan Church of Tonga, which is the Methodist tradition. And so I kind of grew up in that tradition, and it continues to form and shape the way I think, in the way that I do church. It shapes it, but at the same time, I push back on those traditions as well. So in 2010, I was going through, apparently when you get to your late 20s, you want to do something a little bit more meaningful in your life, and you start to question a lot of things about traditions and where you've come from, especially about your faith. And I just happened to be going to the National Christian Youth Convention of the Uniting Church at the time, and there was a lot of people who provided resources and pathways to go through. Wasn't sure what I was trying to do with my life, but I think it's an absolute gift that we have this thing called the period of discernment in the Uniting Church,
Can you
where
tell us a bit about that?
well, it's where it's a type of, it's this thing where they place you with a mentor, and you walk alongside them, and you if you feel a sense of call to a particular ministry, or if you're discerning where you are going, your mentor works with you to explore different avenues of the church that might be the place where God is calling you into. And so I had this experience, and I was placed with a wonderful mentor, Christine Bayless Kelly, and she saw that I was struggling with the whole idea of the minister of the word. Because for me, it was such a traditional Tongan understanding of what a minister is. You're called to the gathered community, and you work alongside the people in the church all the time. And I didn't feel that's where my calling was, but I felt there was a sense of call to the ministry of the ordained. Ministry of the ordained is where you're called, your whole life being is called into that ministry. And then she said, oh, I feel like your call might be a little bit like my husband. He's a deacon. And so I started exploring that avenue. And at the time I came in, it was really hard because there were no Tongans who were in the ministry of deacon. And so I was placed alongside other people, and that was still really helpful for me. And I realized then that I will have to be the pioneering person to kind of break down that tradition of every Tongan going into ministry to minister of the word. I will eventually have to be the first Tongan to be going into the ministry of deacon. And my way of finding that call was I have a passion for social justice. Obviously, being a person of color and seeing the way people are treated unequally because of the way you speak. Obviously, my name is really difficult for some to pronounce, and just seeing my existence as the other, whether people are intentional about it or not, I saw that. And then knowing that Jesus was always called in to the margins, he was so passionate about bringing justice into the lives of those who have been marginalized. Those were the areas that I felt more alive in being in those areas. And I felt that's why I was more drawn to the ministry of deacons, because deacons are called to this scattered community to be we're called into the servanthood identity of Christ. And so that's why I was pretty much drawn to that. So there's my story. Kind of that's where my calling has drawn me to the ministry of deacon.
And Lofa, you were actually the first Tongan person to be ordained into the ministry of deacon. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And you sashed me. Sashing means when you put a sash on somebody. So Ness I had the honor of having Ness put a sash on me on my ordination, just to make that clear.
That's
pretty
great.
cool. It was pretty cool, babe. And then you and I got to sash and pin Reverend Richard Pensini, whose son is an eel, can I just say? And just a few weeks ago, and Lofa and I were both there, and it was really special, Jonty, to be two of his colleagues and for him to ask us to be a part of that. It was very honouring, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can
was a
you
wonderful
talk?
moment.
Yeah, it was a wonderful moment. Wasn't a dry eye. It was just tops, Jonty.
Yeah, great.
Can you talk about this, our symbols of the diaconate and what you did in the ordination? Because it was very special and very meaningful. And I think it really helped explain the diaconate to many people that would not have known.
Well, there is the sash that we wear, which looks like a beauty pageant sash, but it's symbolic of our identity as servants who go out and wash the feet of people. And the second symbol that we brought to the ordination was the bowl and the towel. And so the sash hangs to the side because we're always kneeling at our feet to serve. So it's about service as well as the servanthood of Christ who kneeled at his feet to wash the feet of his disciples and those that he came to serve. So yeah, those are the two symbols of, I hope that's clear enough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear from you. You talked about like having a real passion for social justice and then that sort of leading you on a path of discernment into ordination. What were the next steps from there that took you into where you are now in chaplaincy at a university?
So that's a passion of mine, and the way I channel that out is through my poetry. So I like to write poetry. I also like I'm also a biblical scholar, so those are the type of lenses that I look for, are the voices that are often ignored in the Bible, and so those are the gifts that I bring to ministry, and being called into this role. I was at Macquarie University first, doing a 6 months role with the students there. And that's how I kind of came to see that I can see my gifts being utilized in that space. One, you can lead Bible studies and be really good at facilitating conversations with students, and also invite students to be in a space where they can reread particular stories that we think we know well, but also creating space for them to rethink about particular stories in the Bible. And so when this role came out, it's a pioneering role to start the tertiary chaplaincy of the Uniting Church here at Port Macquarie campus for Charles Sturt University. And those are the main things I wanted to raise was, you bring your heart of compassion and empathy, and you sit with young people, you're present to young people. At the same time, you're listening and you're finding space and creating space to be in conversations with them and also opening up the Bible. So there's so much work and so many opportunities for the church to be working in a university space, but there's also that responsibility of us of equipping ourselves. If you're leading Bible studies, equip yourselves on how to read the Bible responsibly. And I want to emphasize that we read the Bible responsibly as responsible readers as well. And look, just having a heart of being non-judgment, and being genuine, because young people can just sniff that from far away if you're not.
Yeah.
Definitely agree.
They have a bullshit radar, don't they?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So, Lofa, what does a day in the life of you as a university chaplain look like? Can you paint that picture for us?
So, chaplaincy is the ministry of loitering, isn't that what they call it? you're loitering with intention.
Mm.
So you can just sit around and someone will just sit next to you and start telling you how their day is going. And so you come into that conversation with them. And so you got to for me, I make time for that to be around the university, and people might just start having conversations with me. But there are also primary spaces that I go into. So right behind me is the First Nations Centre here at Port campus. So I do spend like every day, I'll spend at least 2-3 hours in there. There are always conversations and students in need. Yeah, some weeks are really bad, some are really good. So yeah, you just gotta divide up your time, but it's all about being present. There are times that it gets really quiet. And in between those times, you have to make time to write your sermons. Or if you're like me, I contribute to publications and things. And so in between that, you've got to make time for all of that. So I guess you've got to be really good at managing your time. And I'm not good at it. I just keep learning how to do it.
Lofa, so do you preach regularly?
Yes. So because I'm in the Mid-North Coast, we don't have a lot of ministers out here. So the churches are always looking for preachers. And for me, that's always an opportunity to promote the chaplaincy and what we do with young people. So yeah, I guess it's a typical day for me. And, I go into meetings. I still commit some of my time back to the wider church, being in committees. I know it's yuck, but
we're very grateful for your work that you do on committees. It's all a part of what we call to do, right?
Yeah. So a bit of my time is committed to committees, and I still do contribute some of my time to providing pastoral care for some of the staff here on campus as well. In fact, I will be presiding at a wedding for next week, and it's one of the staff members here. So it's for me, it's, building relationships with people here on campus is really important, because they then trust you with some of the most important parts of their lives, being at their graduations, birthdays, and weddings.
How amazing. So
Yeah.
you do get to do it all.
I get to do it all, but with a scattered community.
Yeah.
It's not just the gathered.
Yeah, it's such an impact that you have, and you get to do it, as I describe, sort of via stealth. You go in like an aircraft that's undetected by radar. You get to bring the Jesus message just in because that's who Lofa is. And you just get to be present in people's lives with a conversation. It's so cool. Sounds like a great job.
Yeah.
Great calling.
It definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And so diverse. You get to do so many different things.
Yeah. So the way you build like a group on campus is you got to find people that has any interest in what the church is trying to do. Especially when they're asking, what's the church doing here?
Wow.
Yeah. So what you find is, you build like a community, a group of community, a community of young people who have the same interests, like myself, building and creating space for those who are not very welcome in different places here. And we have a lot of those students. So
yeah, we've been talking a fair bit recently on this show after our particularly after our live event a couple of months ago, by the time this comes out, about this idea of inclusivity and how inclusivity looks in a really practical way and not just in a way that is kind of theoretical. And that's a really interesting framework that I hadn't even considered, especially, I guess, maybe even working in a university setting, which is, I imagine, much more transient. There are people that come and go a lot quicker than, just by nature of, you only spend 3, 4, 5 years studying in any one place and then you're off to the next thing. How do you approach, and you started to speak about it a little bit there, that practice of inclusivity in the groups that you're a part of?
So, for me, being inclusive is also about being authentic with yourself. And it all comes down to us reflecting and practicing the love of God in the way that we talk to people, the way that we practice whatever it is that we're trying to do. And so to say more about that is, I think for us, it's about affirming. You know, a lot of the stuff on sexuality is still critical for some people to accept, or even to be open about, to talk about it. So what we say to students when they come into coming to check out our group is, we see you are here, you are affirmed. Your sexuality or whatever it is that you are affirmed. But we all journeying together. And I have to say, I don't know enough. I'm a heterosexual woman, but let's work together, understanding, I get the pronouns wrong all the time. So let's work together on this. But, we have a lot of work. We have to know what it is when we say we are an affirming community. It's not just an aspirational document that we say and put aside, but we have to work on it. And so the university has an allyship. There's an allies program that you have to update, refresh on being trained into being allies of the LGBTIQ community. So that's a big must for our group. Everyone has to be trained in it. So there's also ways of, exploring queer reading in the Bible. I'm not an expert, but I've had my wonderful friend, Reverend James Aaron, come on and led some of the studies on that. So being inclusive is a real big, it's a big job. And it's an ongoing thing. We have to keep learning, and trying things out, and just being honest with ourselves that we're not all experts in doing this inclusive thing.
Yeah, I'm reminded of something that Peter Powell said when he was on the show. He used the illustration of Grover on Sesame Street, how he wants to get there. And it's a lesson that they use on Sesame Street to teach kids the difference between here and there. And he wants to get there. And so he goes over and he goes, see, now I'm there. And they say, no, now you're here. Oh, but I want to get there. So he moves back. Now I'm there. No, now you're here.
Yeah.
And I love that as an image of inclusivity isn't just a thing that you do once, or like you said, write on a document and put to one side. Like, it's something you have to actually continually aspire towards and practice.
Yeah.
It's not just a check the box.
It's become a part of our DNA, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that we just don't, it becomes a non-conscious thing. We just, at the moment, we're still being conscious of it. And when it becomes unconscious, a little bit like, when you drive, you can go from here down to the shops, and then you can have had a conversation on the phone and you don't remember turning left or right or stopping at the traffic lights. That's how inclusivity needs to become. It needs to become
Yeah,
such
ideally.
a part of us that
Yeah,
we don't even have to think about it.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I still have to think about the pronoun thing. I still stuff that up, Lofa. I'm
Yeah.
really glad to hear that you say that, because all my daughters think I'm so shit at it, and they stick it up me big time, like really rip into me about it. And I'm trying, man. I really am trying. Keep trying, Mum. Try harder. It's not rocket science, they say.
But even just there, like you're practicing it.
I am. I have
Whereas
to.
a less healthy approach to it would be, well, I've tried it and I don't understand, and so I'm going to stop there.
So why is it easy for them? Why do they just, is it they're quick adopters of
By
change?
them,
Is
do
that
you mean
it?
young people?
Yeah, my daughters.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess because it's a more present and current thing that has always just been a thing.
For them.
Yeah, for them.
Yeah.
That it hasn't been something that they've had necessarily maybe had to learn. It's just been a thing.
Yes.
Because any learned behavior is hard, and you have to practice and
you're right.
and spend time doing it. And so wherever we have weaknesses, whether it's in cultural diversity or sexual diversity or all the different, like wherever it is, we all have weaknesses. And so pointing out other people's weaknesses is so like not helpful, because we all have those weaknesses.
Yeah.
But like being able to be self-reflexive enough and self-aware enough to go, oh, I need to get better at this, is really important. And being able to show grace when people get things wrong. Yeah. So that's really cool to hear you speak about it, because I think universities, and certainly it's been my experience, is universities are a place where like there's a cutting edge of thought and culture happening, because it's where young people meet and smash ideas together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, has that been your experience, and what's it like being in those spaces where people are pushing things forward in new and exciting ways?
I have to say, I see that as an absolute blessing and a gift to this ministry. Seeing young people come into the group, and they just pick up whatever it is that we're trying to do, and they take off with it. And so for me, that for me is about us kind of stepping back, but still supporting them walking alongside them. And I say that because earlier this year, one of the students got employed by our local church to be the administration officer there at the church, and the jobs she gets done is a job that some of the church people thought that would take her a week or two, but she said it just took her a few minutes. Things like archiving, and she would just like scan documents and then she'll archive it. Yeah, so and the difference. So for me, it's about recognizing the gifts that these young people bring to the ministry.
Oh yeah.
And then allowing them to flourish as you journey alongside them. It's funny, we saw our former head of school at UTC over that weekend. Ness and I were together down at Richard's ordination, and I said to him, I'm sorry for being a troublemaker when we were at college. And he said, no, it was really about bringing out what was in there. You're not a troublemaker. It's really about bringing out what's inside people and affirming them. And I thought that was such a important point he made. And so I think that's what we bring to these young people as well. We need to be open and keep working hard and work alongside them to bring out what it is, the best of them. Yeah.
It's It's a precious role that you have. It's really sort of like a Reverend Mother role in a sense, because you're often those uni kids are away from their homes and they have no older adult in their life because they're all back at home. And you bring that sensibility and maturity into the relationship and into the space. It's really special, Lofa.
Yeah.
It's a real gift.
Yeah. I think it just goes back to, you know, not seeing them as powerless, but we empower them because they can do things on their own. We just need to keep supporting them in whatever it is that they're trying to do.
Extraordinary.
Okay. Yeah.
I was wondering, Lofa, when we had our live event, we asked a panel of people this question, and I'm wondering if I can be so bold as to ask you the same question, because we're gathering intel for the intel for our church. And the question was about future-proofing ourselves as a church so that we could be relevant for the next generations of seekers and believers. So can you think of ways that we can future-proof ourselves as believers so that we can keep doing God's work the way that we are, or maybe in different ways?
Yeah. I think it comes down to equipping ourselves, not so much because the world wants us to change, but it's really about naturalizing ourselves in equipping ourselves, naturalizing ourselves to be the best we can be for other people. And I'll go back, because I'm a biblical scholar, I go back to that because I don't think we equip ourselves enough on that. Equipping ourselves, how do we read the Bible in context, contextually, and and equipping other people as well, in equipping other people to read the Bible responsibly. For me, that's always a big thing, because the Bible plays a really big role and influences the way we do things and the way we shape ourselves. For me, that's really crucial.
Have you had experiences, Lofa, where you have watched people of faith present the biblical text in a way that has been miscommunicated and poorly represented? And what impact has that had?
Yes, definitely. Yes, that's why biblical studies is a passion of mine. In terms of the way particular text does not name, you talk about the violence in the Bible, we often overlook it. Particularly against women. We read the type of text like Bathsheba last Sunday, Bathsheba and David.
Can you just tell our audience a little bit about Bathsheba and David and set the context for us?
Which version would you like? The R-rated or?
I want the feminist version. Yeah, because it's a dodgy story, isn't it?
Yeah. So Bathsheba is this woman who lived next door to King David, and she was married to David's head of the army. I think that's what they called her. And while all the men went to war, King David does not go to war. He stays in the kingdom, and he stays within the kingdom, and happens to be the only man who was staying there with all the other women. And so before all the men went to war, oh, sorry, I'm getting this thing all over the place. So he sees her, she's bathing outside her house, and he sends for her to come over his house, and he sleeps with her. And then the next time that the army goes out, he sends out her husband, who is the head of the army, and he gets killed. And well, before he got killed, after he sleeps with Bathsheba, I am saying sleep, but most feminists would say it's rape.
Shagged her brains out. You can say it on this podcast, Lofa. It's okay.
And so when after they sleep together, she gets pregnant, and then then David sends her husband off to war, and he comes back, and there's a bit of a if you read the text, you'll notice how David plays all these little games to get her husband to go and sleep with her. And for me, what I took out of that is, well, if her husband Uriah finds out that she's pregnant, he'll think it's because they laid together. But then David sends him off to war again. Then he gets killed, and so he's safe after all. Because if her husband had found out that she got pregnant while he was at war, the only male who was in the town, in the kingdom, was the king. So,
yeah. Do you think she was a willing participant and they just had a sexy night together? Or do you think it was forced?
I think we need to be a bit careful about painting. That's the type of, when we start to paint the stories in that way and assume that she was consenting, I think that's what we need to be really careful about when we read the text.
Because
I don't think she consented.
So many readings that I've assumed is that she's painted like some who just sleeps with David, because she's she's out for a bit of, I won't say what I was going to say, but boy, it was funny. And she was, wants to do a bit of climbing.
Yeah. So those are some of the readings written by men. Is that, well, if you live next door to the king, you know what time he comes out for his walk. So you're obviously going to have this shower outside. You're going to bathe yourself outside your house so that he can have that opportunity of looking over.
Which is so in line with like modern contemporary dialogue from men about things like purity culture, where it's like, well, if you didn't want that behavior, then you shouldn't dress like that, or you shouldn't behave this way, which is placing all of the responsibility for things like assault onto the woman, which you can trace all the way back to narratives like this in scripture, which have been presented through a male lens.
Lofa's had a change of scene, changed place, because that's typical in a day in the life of a chaplain, finding a place that's quiet so that you can have a Zoom conversation with us. Thank you. But we were talking about responsible Bible reading, and we're in the guts. We're at the sexy point of Uriah's gone off to war. David's just shagged Bathsheba, and I was talking about how previous readings paint Bathsheba to be some kind of for, luring him into the bedroom, and she gets knocked up, and then they do the quick switcheroo and make sure there's semen on board from Uriah. But meanwhile, King David sends him off to war and the poor bastard dies. How's that for reading the Bible responsibly?
Perfectness.
Okay, so have I caught you up?
Yes, absolutely.
Over to you. So what do we do with that then?
I think that there's there's this self-reflection that we do before we come to the text, so that we are aware of the biases that we come with. So, you look at your, where do I come from? Where am I located when I'm reading this type of text? So I would say for me, I'm a person of color. I come from the Pacific. What would my biases be? I guess I read from the lenses of women, and I would always look for those who are voiceless in the text. Am I rich or poor? I think I'm in between. So those are the biases that we need to kind of, there's always this reflective thing of ourselves before we come to the text, so that we are aware of our conscious biases as well. The other parts to be responsible about is also looking at how the text, what Jonty was talking about, how has the text, how have they affected and influenced society? So a particular story like David and Bathsheba, it's kind of like a victim blaming sort of story as well. And so those are the things that we need to look at before we come to the text, and be, to continuously be self-assessing ourselves about our biases when we read those type of texts. So last year, I know we're talking about being responsible readers, but our study group, we had a study group with the students in the second semester, and it was based on the text of terror. And so that was focusing on particular texts in the Bible that terrorizes women. So a text like Judges 19, where the concubine of a Benjamite, her body was dismembered into 12 parts. So she's not named, she's called the concubine, and then her body gets dismembered. And those type of stories can be triggering for people that are readers. And so being the facilitator, you have to be mindful what that can do for the hearers. So how you facilitate those conversations about those particular stories is your responsibility. How do you tell the stories? How do you allow space for people to receive those types of stories? At the same time, make space for people to make comments and ask questions. And they can be helpful in that sense. So one of the things we did with some of those texts of terror was, being responsible is also about protesting against the patriarchy in the text. And so what we done was we named those unnamed women, and we prayed, we put names for them and put their names down, and we had this circle of candles, and we named them and put them down, and we said they are not unknown, and they are now remembered with names. And so that's how you kind of push back on the text, and you allow for that to happen. For me, that's part of being responsible readers, is to name those who are unknown. So that's just kind of a bit of what we do here.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is so rich, isn't it? Yeah. It's so interesting, Lofa, talking about terror texts. Today I just taught at scripture, and I was teaching about Moses, and we were up to the section where Moses, the plagues had just been sent, and the baby firstborn sons had all been knocked off in Egypt, and Moses is about to flee, do a runner with his people. And my little kids are saying to me, and I'm giving no graphics because they're little, no graphics.
Yeah.
And then I've got these beautiful bits of felt down on the floor to make the ocean. And then we part the ocean, and then I be a horse on a chariot. I get all of Moses's people through to the other side, and then I be a horse on the chariot, and then the ocean comes up, and I don't say anything. I remove myself from the ocean, and then I bring the ocean back together. And a little kid says, Miss Rev Ness, did people drown?
Oh,
I know. And I thought, oh, okay, I could bullshit and say no, and I don't want to do that. And I just said, I think there might have been some. I wasn't there, but I think some might have got caught in the waves.
Yeah.
Because that can be a thing.
And that honesty is really important.
Yeah, but they're with God now.
To young people.
Yeah, but they're with God now. And they it's like they have a bullshit radar, little kids. They're amazing. And I had to they know that if you're not telling them the truth, they can sniff it out.
Yeah.
And so I just had to give them enough, but to not terrorize them, because it's terrifying, bloody, the firstborn son of every family in Egypt's going to die. Bloody awful bit of text, isn't it?
Yeah.
Horrible
Definitely.
stuff. And try knock out a bunch of plagues. Nothing lovely about that.
Yeah.
But particularly in a season of corona, it's quite terrifying for a child. So being responsible to the text and to the I suppose the through the lens at which you present the material and the audience that is receiving. So your audience are adult people that love terror, actually. Jonty is in love with terror. You love being terrorized by horror.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a difference between... so Ness is spot on. I do I love watching horror films, but there's an important distinction between being in a situation where I can safely interface with stories that have a terrifying element because they can teach us things about ourselves versus real immediate danger and terror. And I think my understanding of just where this conversation has brought me along the way is where these stories bring a need for a responsible reading is when they can actually touch on real life terror that people experience. So when we talk about Bathsheba, for example, once we start to read that for what it is as a story of assault and murder, those are real things that happen to people.
They are.
And we certainly, in my own reflection, having this conversation, need to be responsible in how we teach those stories and how we then have conversations about those stories, because they can, in the same way that watching a horror film about a serial killer and a murderer or something, whatever, is all fun and games until suddenly it touches on something that you've experienced and it can become really traumatizing. We have to be really responsible about how we interact with these stories with people because they can have real life tangible effects. Big stuff. How do you have any thoughts on how you navigate that?
Sorry, what's the question again? And how do we
how to navigate when stories from scripture touch on real life things that can bring up real responses based on, like when we talk about the story of Bathsheba, for example, about that touches on assault.
It's domestic violence.
Yeah, how we talk about that story with people that maybe have experienced similar in a way that is helpful and nurturing and not damaging and harmful.
I think part of our responsibility is, you got to give some sort of pre-warning before you go into it. and at the same time, you got to be available to listen to that person once they say, hey, this is quite triggering. And you got to give them the space as well. If it's an unknown, like if it's a space where you don't know everybody, yeah, that's totally up. That's totally in your boat to begin by saying some of the imageries here may be disturbing to some of us. So if you need time to step out, please, you can do that. And I guess you can have other people in the room who can be pastorally caring for them as well. I just did a class in January with Professor Monica Melanchthon over at the University of Divinity, and it was about gender, justice, and empire. And some of the whole class, I think there was only one male and mainly females in there, and we had a few people who were survivors of sexual abuse, and they were very strong enough to sit through some of some of the readings and some of the lecture, but we were always giving them the space to step out if it was too much for them.
That's really
it
powerful.
is so it's still a big responsibility to hold the space, hold it lightly, and just always be mindful.
You're a powerful chick. They're lucky to have you there at CSU, sister.
Oh, stop that, Ness. We get into trouble because of you.
Ness get in trouble? I've never heard of that happening ever.
I'm doing fine at the moment. I'm good. I'm not busted at the moment. No. It's all good, Lofa. It's okay. You can hang out with me at the minute, But can I ask you something that you are grateful for in your life today?
I'm very grateful that God continues to surround me with people who are affirming of my gifts and who I am, because I'm not a very confident person, because I'm quite a high achiever in my work. I tend to be a little bit hard on myself. So I'm quite an introvert. So it's nice to have friends like Vanessa who kind of get your spirit, wakens your spirit up. And even being here at this university, it's hard to start a ministry. It's hard to pioneer any ministry. But I believe that God has always kind of, placed me with people that God has put in my life. And we're able to work together. So for me, that's what I'm grateful for, that is the people that are affirming of who I am and that are genuine friends to me. That's what I'm grateful for.
Well,
it's a blessing.
Be affirmed, sister. You're a blessing to the Uniting Church. You always have been. You were little Miss Buddy Goody Two Shoes, perfect academic pain in the ass. When I was always so jealous of you, so you're so brainy. And so I'm not surprised you're doing what you're doing, little Miss Buddy Biblical Scholar. Whatever. Said with great love. But we just had on a show Reverend Dr. Karina Kreminski, who was talking about fresh expressions of ministry. And she was talking about those she had a word, I called them God instances, sort of not
The incidental.
the incidental times where we, like you were saying, where you just loiter with intent and then God places that right person for a sacred conversation in your midst. And can I tell you, sister, that is good and faithful servant. Go and continue to be you who God equipped you to be, because you're doing really powerful work for young people that need to know how great our God is. Oh, there's a lyric for a song.
Thank
Write it
you.
down quick.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being with us on the podcast. We really appreciate your time. If people have questions for us or for Lofa as well, they can email us at filthyhopepod@gmail.com, and anything that comes through for you, we'll pass through, and we'll jump on another Zoom call and have another chat sometime soon. I think that just about does us. Is there anything else? Any final thoughts, Ness, before we
Oh, I just
kick
love
this thing
her.
home?
I just wish I could give her a big hug. She's just
Virtual hug.
beautiful. You're a special woman, Lofa. You really
Oh,
are.
and so are you, Ness.
You are, sister. You are a very special lady.
Yeah, so thank you. So we really, really appreciate you being here, and thank you for being so generous with your time and with your words.
No worries. Have a blessing to you and this event that you're doing. It's certainly a great movement for the church to be listening to, the filthy stuff.
I love it.
We'll continue being filthy.
Yes, that's right.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, bye.
This is a